My story is like, you know, one of those stories that sounds too crazy to be true, but I swear it happened. I'm just a regular guy. I work a 9 to 5 job, pay my bills, and try to live a normal life. But a few years ago, I got caught up in something that still gives me nightmares. It all started at a bar. Isn't that how most crazy stories start? It was a Friday night, and I was out with some buddies at this place called the Blue Lantern. It's a pretty chill spot. Decent beer, good music, and a lot of people our age. I wasn't really looking to meet anyone that night. I was just there to hang out and blow off some steam after a long week at work. But then I saw her. She was sitting at the bar by herself, sipping a beer and scrolling through her phone. She had this long, dark hair and a smile that could light up the room. I don't know what came over me, but I walked up to her and said something stupid like, "Hey, is this seat taken?" She laughed and said no, so I sat down. We started talking, and it was like we'd known each other forever. Her name was Elena, and she was funny, smart, and way out of my league. But for some reason, she seemed into me. We ended up talking for hours. My friends left at some point, but I didn't even notice. We were laughing, flirting, and just having a great time. When the bar closed, she asked if I want to go back to her place. I said yes, obviously. I mean, she was gorgeous, and we'd hit it off so well. Why wouldn't I? Her place was nice. Way nicer than my apartment. It was in this fancy building downtown, and it was decorated like something out of a magazine. We stayed up late talking, and one thing led to another. I won't go into details, but let's just say it was a great night. After that, we started seeing each other regularly. It wasn't anything serious at first, just hanging out, going on dates, and having fun. But over time, I started to really like her. She was smart, independent, and had this confidence that I admired. Plus, she seemed to like me for who I was, which wasn't something I was used to, but then things started to get weird. It was little things at first, like she'd get these phone calls late at night and would leave the room to take them, or she'd suddenly cancel plans without much explanation. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured she was just busy or had stuff going on. But then there was the time I saw her talking to this guy outside her building. He looked sketchy. Tattoos, gold chains, the whole thing. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off and said he was just an old friend. The biggest red flag, though, was when I met her dad. Elena had mentioned him a few times, but she always seemed kind of vague about what he did for work. She just said he was in business. One night, she invited me over for dinner at her parents' house. I was nervous, obviously. Meeting the parents is always a big deal. But I wasn't ready for what I saw when I got there. Her dad's house was huge, like mansion huge. It had a gate, security cameras, and a guy at the front door who looked like a bodyguard. Inside, it was all marble floors and fancy art. Her dad was intense. He was this big, imposing guy with a deep voice and a handshake that could crush bones. He introduced himself as Raphael, and he had this way of looking at you like he was sizing you up. It was intimidating, to say the least. Then it was awkward. Raphael asked me a lot of questions. What I did for work, where I lived, who my family was. It felt more like an interrogation than a conversation. Elena tried to keep things light, but I could tell she was nervous too. After dinner, Raphael took me aside and said something I'll never forget.
"You seem like a nice kid, but if you hurt my daughter, you'll regret it."
He said it with a smile, but there was something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. After that night, I started noticing more things that didn't add up, like the way people would act around Elena, like they were scared of her, or the way she'd sometimes talk about her dad like he was some kind of king. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then, one night, I found out the truth. I was at Elena's place, and she was in the shower. Her laptop was on the coffee table, and it was open to an email. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the subject line caught my eye. Shipment details. I clicked on it, and that's when I saw it. The email was about a delivery of something. It didn't say what exactly, but there were a lot of numbers and code words that sounded suspicious. At the bottom of the email, there was a name, L. Jeef. I didn't know what it meant at the time, but I had a bad feeling. I started digging through her emails, and that's when I saw it. Messages about money, drugs, and something called the cartel. My heart was pounding. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there in front of me. I closed the laptop and tried to act normal when Elena came out of the shower, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. A few days later, I decided to do some research. I looked up Raphael's name, and that's when I found a news article from a few years ago. It didn't mention him by name, but it talked about a drug cartel operating in the area. The leader of the cartel was referred to as El Jeef. My stomach dropped. It was the same name I'd seen in Elena's email. I didn't know what to do. I was scared, confused, and angry. I confronted Elena about it, and at first, she tried to deny it, but eventually, she broke down and told me the truth. Her dad wasn't just in business. He was the head of a drug cartel, and she wasn't just his daughter. She was involved in the family business too. She said she wanted to tell me, but was scared of how I'd react. But that wasn't even the worst part. She also told me about her ex-boyfriend, a guy named Marco. Apparently, he was still working for her dad, and he was intense. She said he'd been obsessed with her, and didn't take it well when they broke up. I didn't think much of it at the time, but then I started noticing things. Like the way my car would sometimes have dents or scratches when I parked outside her place. Or the way I'd see the same black SUV driving past my apartment at night. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Marco. He didn't introduce himself, but I knew it was him from the way he talked. He said he knew I was dating Elena and that I needed to stay away from her. He said it wasn't a threat. It was a warning. I hung up, but I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. I felt like I was being watched, like I was in way over my head. I broke up with Elena after that. It wasn't easy. I'd really started to care about her, but I couldn't be a part of that world. I moved to a different city and changed my phone number. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I just wanted to forget about it and move on with my life. But I still think about it sometimes. I think about Elena and how different things could have been if she'd been honest with me from the start. I think about Raphael and the way he looked at me when he threatened me. And I think about Marco and the way he made me feel like I was never safe. It's scary, you know? How easily you can get caught up in something without even realizing it. I was just a regular guy, trying to live a normal life. But one night at a bar changed everything. And I'll never forget it.